Christine. This is such a pleasure. We have a lot of fans of yours in the house tonight.
Great. It's a pleasure for me too.
Wonderful. I'm just going to ask our back of house. How's that level? Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Thank you again for joining us so much. How's the paperback release going?
I think it's going pretty well. It's, so far so good. It's really fun to see it come out and have another breath.
Yeah, I'm sure. I am curious, the hardcover came out last year, so that was was it last year or was it the year
It was before? April 2023. Yes, last year.
Okay. I'm a dummy. I thought I'm like a year behind. I thought that last year was 2022. And I was like, how is that 1 year after January 6th? But 2 years removed. So maybe that's not a relevant question. So, can you just kick it off? Tell us a little bit about how did Hestia Strikes a Match come to be?
That's a good question. I think the real thing was that I found myself working remotely all of a sudden during the pandemic. And that was wow, I have a couple extra hours or, an hour and a half extra every day. The mornings were suddenly so different than they were. And the pandemic just was so mind-blowing, right? Just in terms of having to relearn everything and adjust to new ways of doing things that you thought you knew how to do, that things that you thought were routine and normal, and you were suddenly relearning. And then, as you mentioned, the January 6th insurrection happened. And, so they were all, when I look back on it, it's kind of hard to believe that all that happened at the same time. I think maybe we're still exhausted. But so that's when I started writing it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about things like, what would this really normal, mundane thing that I'm doing right now, what would that be like during a civil war? If we did have a civil war, what would it be like if my kids were trying to get driver's licenses and go to proms and I just had to go grocery shopping? During the pandemic, that was one of those things that I never liked grocery shopping to begin with. And then all of a sudden it became this multi-hour ordeal. This normal thing became. So I started thinking a lot about how would a person who's just trying to live as normal a life as possible, how would that feel during this civil war?
Well, for Hestia's sake, I'm glad that her solution was not, I think, what a lot of us, myself included, did during the pandemic, which was just drink a lot of wine especially over Zoom with friends. It was still social drinking. It was very much a non-healthy coping skill. So I'm very glad for Hestia's sake. She seems to have come out of this with slightly better habits, although one of those habits might not be self-reflection when it comes to how she's engaging with her romantic interests. So could you talk a little bit about using that as a framing device and the men she meets, and I didn't really put that as a question per se to send to you ahead of time, but they're all so different and they reveal something different about Hestia. One of the things that Savannah, she's my store manager who's here with us tonight, we're talking about is that she seems to cut relationships off at the knees,
right,
pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Which is just if you could talk a little bit about writing her and what drove you to write a character like this.
Yeah, sure. So I went through a divorce in my early 40s, long, 20-year marriage, and then a divorce that ended in my early 40s. And I realized at some point that I wasn't nearly as mature as I thought I was, and that I had missed all these really critical decades of dating where things had changed so much. And it was kind of a rocky ride for me, adjusting to life as a single person. And so one of the things that was so appealing about when I first started playing around with this character, Hestia, is I just wanted to make her kind of like more immature than I was, like more prone to bad decisions and bad behavior than I was. And it was very cathartic for me to just like imagine my worst self and write about her. So I think that's, yeah, I think she does cut off a lot of the relationships. I mean, that's one of the comments I keep getting from people all the time is, you've read the book, is like, well, why couldn't she stay with Jamie, or why couldn't she stay with so-and-so? Why, will they get back together? And I think my answer is just, she's just not ready. She's just not mature enough. And she has this, it's, in a place like as I imagine the Civil War, everything's so uncertain. It's hard to make commitments when life is so uncertain. And I think we kind of take that for granted. But how do you commit to something when you're scared all the time?
Absolutely. And I mean, to your credit, when Hestia goes into this, she says, like, I'm not looking for anything serious. Like, I'm looking to just not be alone. And I think that's such a relatable thing. And also, I should say, like, as a currently 35-year-old person, I also related a lot to Hestia and like that diving in, because when I got married when I was 25, and I met my husband 5 years before that, before dating apps were a thing. So this is just like terrifying, absolutely terrifying to me. I would never date ever again.
Be afraid. Be very afraid. Yes.
It's totally alien to me. And I heard the observations that she makes, and the people she meets, were very, very funny. It's like, you always want to talk to your friend that has the worst luck to hear about their trials and tribulations. And so that was a very fun thing to hear about.
Well, one of my favorite lines that I wrote toward the end of the book and put in the front was something about how loneliness is its own form of brain damage. And I just really felt that as I was, meeting all sorts of people who were alone and who were lonely, and thinking, they're just like, we're all so damaged. Like, it's hard to make good decisions about anything when you're lonely. And then I think there was a lot of research at the time coming out too to support that all those longevity studies and those longitudinal studies showing like the single most important thing besides not smoking for your health is having friends.
Yeah. Well, and to a little bit pivot to the discussion about framing this within the Civil War, I feel like recently I've heard similar research about like people who like fall down like a very extreme right, like QAnon level wing. Like they're very, a lot of times, especially like folks in our parents' and grandparents' generations, like they're very lonely and they're siloing themselves. And so and like you see that with Hestia's parents as well. Like they have created this reality for themselves that has enough truth that they can kind of persist it, but they've siloed themselves into the sense of reality that I think it's easy for them to not see the commonality they have with like lonely people on the other side.
Right.
So that was like, we're all just lonely, but in different ways.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we all do that too, is we all have our bubbles, and maybe we're not all lonely, but we do. It's very hard to get out of silos. It's very hard to leave your bubble, even if you're trying to.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of self-reflection. That's time intensive and difficult. I do want to ask about the like logistics though of the Civil War. I like, that would be my one criticism of the book, just because I was getting really nerdy about it. Let's just like thinking about how this new country would function and the different decisions that would be made. And I think the tidbits that you gave us were so interesting and compelling that I'm really curious, like what was left out of the book. And so just like for anybody who maybe didn't finish the book or doesn't remember, I'm referring to like the fact that there would be like a aftermarket for Viagra and for abortifacients, and then that condoms would be like at a premium. So would different types of whiskey
Right.
because of the where it's made, and how different military resources would be allocated. I just found really fascinating. So, and it seemed, and it was very like logical and well thought out. So any just like behind the scenes tidbits that you can offer from that process.
Yeah. So I think it was for me, I did look back at some history from the first Civil War to see how that went down. And I based a lot of it on that. Because there was a secession, and it was in this book, it's pretty much the same states seceding as it was in the 1860s. And I just felt like I couldn't invent a whole new scenario. Why not just use the one that happened? That one existed, and it was pretty dramatic. And weirdly, like, we're not that much farther away from that scenario, ideologically. And so it kind of worked out for me to do that. I read The Next Civil War by Stephen Marche, which has some really interesting scenarios, and not very much like what I used in Hestia, but that book has some interesting scenarios. And I also will admit that I went on to some subreddits for the fun part. People spend a lot of time online thinking about these things, and the but all the bourbon and the Viagra and the healthcare bus that goes down south, like the Medicine Without Frontiers. I was just kind of basing that on real life scenarios of what you see in war-torn countries. And you do see sort of guerrilla groups of doctors going into war-torn countries, and certain commodities are just so expensive because of the shipping and the trade rules. And so I just tried to have fun with that and think of what would be some things that would really affect people. And the cigarettes, right? Like, most of the tobacco is grown in the South, and if you don't want to support that, then where do you get your cigarettes from? You have to pay through the nose to get them through India or France. And it was just really fun thinking about the ways that our ports and our rail system support commerce here.
That was an interesting moment confronting my American identity, where I was like, oh, tobacco grows other places? I didn't know that. This is like, I grew up in North Carolina. I come by it honestly. It's a very tobacco-centric place, but
that's true. You do come by that very honestly. Yes.
I felt pretty silly about that. So another element of the book that like clearly we could not like, I think I would be skewered if I didn't mention, is the retirement community. I loved this convention, and I loved the Scribbles class. I had the opportunity to be with my grandfather at in his last days, and had that. We had our own little. Thank you. We had our own. I think somebody in his hospice care had given us a notebook with these questions that are very much like the questions that the retirees are asked, and basically say, well, that's stupid. I don't want to talk about that. And like, I would ask him these questions, and he would give me no response.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah. So I had to go totally off script. And it resulted in like 2.5, 3 hours of really, really great interview. But it was just so funny to see, like, okay, this is a universal experience. No one knows how to talk to, it's like old people and children are the same. No one knows how to talk to them. It's like, they're not people. It's like, no, they're just people with experiences. Just talk to them that way. So writing about like the retirement community, did you have a favorite retiree to write about? Anything about that experience we'd love to hear about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mildred was my favorite retiree to write about. I mean, she was such a combination of a couple of really important older women in my life. My grandmother was just so sharp, and I mean that in a good way and a bad way. But she was the one who would really just come out. She had no filter. And then there was another aunt in my life who would always like try to corner me and like get me into these, conversation, kind of salacious conversations. She always wanted to get the dirt on things. And I just really loved these women and how kind of like nosy they were, and they were kind of like busybodies. But I loved that no filter thing about them. And in my fantasy, I become an old lady with no filter. So it's sort of writing the person I want to become was Mildred for me. And I loved creating this person who felt like she had a good life, and who, felt like she had, 2 out of 3 marriages were good. That's pretty good. And then I would say Jeffrey was another one of those characters who just didn't have a filter. And I did base those people on, I didn't base them on people that I knew, but their voices. I could hear their voices coming from other people that I know. And it was really fun to write for very kind of different older people with different points of view.
Is there a retirement community in Maryland that seeks to be the wokest retirement community in the land? Do you know?
I don't think there is. I mean, there are quite a few in the Baltimore area, quite a few communities, but I don't think anyone advertises their ideologies or their politics. And I think it's just like, I've heard people say, at that age, you just don't want to talk about it. Like I'm tired sometimes of talking about politics, and I could see being in my 80s and just feeling like it's not germane to my life anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. But yeah, that was an interesting kind of element to add to the retirement community that did make it quite novel. Do you mind if we pivot to her parents?
Yeah, that's great.
That was quite the relationship.
Yes. Yeah, it was. And her parents, I put a lot of energy, I think, into writing her parents because I wanted to be compassionate toward them. I think when I started writing this novel, I was writing it as a very concerned and scared person watching what I felt like was our democracy start to crumble. And and I know a lot of people, mostly in my family, who feel like that's just that's a hysterical reaction. It's, nothing is that bad. You're overreacting. And so I think when I first started to write the parents, I was writing them a little bit caricatured. And then in rewrites, I felt like, no, these are real people. I need to be compassionate. There are actually millions and millions of people in this country who feel the way that they do. And thinking about these people more, like, they're not bad. The people that I know that I was thinking of when I was writing the parents, they're really intelligent, and they're pretty logical, or at least as logical as we all think that we are. And sometimes they're warm. And I just wanted to show more than like caricatures. I wanted to show people who were capable of complex thoughts and complex reasoning, but still felt that they were under attack. Yeah, and I do sort of go into caricature with some of the other more minor figures in the story, but those I wanted to be real. And then also there's the stuff, just the normal like parent-daughter stuff that's so hard and sometimes has nothing to do with politics.
That was such an interesting element, that you have these people who tried so hard for a child, and then it sometimes felt like they were treating parenthood as an experiment, like a philosophical experiment. which was just so sad. And then on the flip, and to have these people that on paper seem like exactly the type of like liberal elite they would hate.
Right.
It was just so like both of these things were so like just blew my mind. How can you as an adult exist with so many contradictions? But people do. That's exactly how people are.
People do. And one of the things that I tried to do was remind myself that they were parents, even though they had this sort of almost narcissistic compulsion to have a child. Hestia's father is still like always sliding food onto her plate because he wants her to eat.
Mhm.
And the mother is, has all of her scrapbooks from when she was a child. They're not monsters. They're parents with a lot, like you said, a lot of contradictions.
Yeah, every parent is a flawed parent, and I think that's all we can take from that.
Yes.
So I have a couple questions from our crowd. I have to ask a question. I don't know what this question is. Can somebody?
Oh, that was just the menu.
Oh, thank you. I was like ABC VI. I didn't know what it was. Okay. I did. Thank you, Savannah. So I did want to tell you what we have to eat. So as I mentioned when we first asked you to do this, we mentioned all the food that's mentioned in the book, and then we send that to the kitchen, and they develop a 3-course menu based on it. We had a lacinato. Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
Okay, lacinato kale panzanella salad.
Oh, wow.
That was so good, so good. And then a barbecue bacon wrapped chicken, which I had to include the baked chicken that Jamie only makes.
Right.
This was we also get a little bit of Marcello in this dish because there was some polenta with some porcini gravy on there. I haven't tried to make baked gnocchi yet, but I really want to. I'm very excited to try that.
Right.
Did you do any test cooking of Marcello's tips from this?
I have done the baked gnocchi, and it is really good. Yes.
Would you suggest a potato gnocchi or a ricotta gnocchi?
Oh, potato.
Potato. Okay. Good to know. Yeah. And then that had some shishitos, amazing white balsamic shishitos as well.
Oh, good.
And then for dessert, which I haven't had yet, but I think everybody else has dived into, is a cookies and cream. I think this comes from when she's eating cookies in bed with Tom.
Okay.
Oh no, it's not. It's from first boy Ethan with the boozy milkshakes.
Oh,
We've got a warm chocolate chip cookie with boozy moose tracks dip.
Okay.
So
That's a great menu. I was just taking notes, thinking if I ever need.
I'll send you a picture of it as well. It also has excellent wine pairings that our wine purveyor has provided, and they're all very good as well. Wow. So we are nearing the end of our time with you. So I did want to ask. Are you working on anything right now that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I am working on a new novel that is set on the rural eastern shore of Maryland in a post-democracy landscape that's been really changed by climate change. And the protagonist this time is a 50-year-old woman. She's a widow, and she's living with her young adult children who want to leave the nest and explore the world, but the world feels really dangerous and uncertain to her, which is like normal, I think, for anyone in that position, except it's heightened by how the world actually really has changed and actually really is dangerous.
Is it in the same world as Hestia, or is this just totally different?
No, it's different. It's more, I mean, in my full-time work, a lot of my writing kind of intersects with climate change. So I have that in my head all the time. And so this novel is again, it's like imagining what does normal life look like when the landscape and the terrain and everything has changed so much.
Okay, we will be on the lookout for that. Does that have a publication date yet?
No.
No.
I wish it had a finish date.
Okay, well, we will be on the lookout. We'll be on the lookout for it. And then what are you reading right now or have recently read that you can recommend to us? Because we had we do a poll of how people liked this at the beginning, and it like was exclusively almost exclusively everyone loved it. So I think people would love to know what you are reading as well.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I mean, I have my sort of literary books and I have my super fun books. And I would say that the really literary ones that I've really loved recently have been Sigrid Nunez. She has a book called The Friend, which is very much about writing and academia. I loved that. I loved Emily St. John Mandel's Sea of Tranquility. Elif Batuman, I love reading her. The Idiot was the first thing of hers that I'd ever read, and I read that recently, and it was just like, wow. But also, so I read Romantic Comedy last summer by Curtis Sittenfeld, and I just, oh God, I mean, that was so funny. I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang recently, also very, very funny. And I just saw that movie, American Fiction, not too long ago. And I liked it so much that I read the book it was based on, which is by Percival Everett, and it's called Erasure, I think. And the book is so different from the movie, but it was just as funny and smart. So I really enjoyed those
Those are
books.
some absolutely crackerjack recommendations. Thank you. We
Absolutely.
did. Oh, one other question I did want to ask. Has Hestia been? Is it going to be coming to the big screen or the small screen anytime soon? Do you know?
From your lips to God's ears. I would love for that to happen. I did talk a little bit with an agent last year, not a little bit, a lot with an agent last year in the spring. And there was some interest, but then the writer's strike happened in May of last year, and it lasted a really long time. And then the Actors Guild went on strike, and I think Hollywood hasn't really recovered yet, is what she explained to me. So when this Civil War movie came out a month ago, I was like, we have to get moving on this. But there's nothing in the works yet. But I'm still hopeful that as Hollywood recovers, maybe we'll get some interest back on there.
Depending on how Civil War performs, I feel like you have a good argument either way, because it's like, no, it's not like that movie. It is about a civil war, but it's totally different. And then if it does well, you're like, see, people need the romantic version of this. It's a win-win for you both ways.
Right. The rom-com version of this terrifying movie. Yes.
Finding love even amongst destruction, or at least finding like the occasional good lay in the midst of destruction.
Correct.
We did have some good casting ideas, just if that ever comes up. So Hestia, we have Brie Larson.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. Toni Collette and Maya Rudolph as well.
Okay.
The husband who's I feel so bad about saying this, but I feel like it's actually a good reflection on how the character is written. I cannot for the life of me remember his name, but her husband, they want to cast as Chris Pratt, which I think that's a good fit.
Yeah, I don't think he has a name.
He doesn't? Okay, Savannah, you were totally right. Yeah. You were totally right. Yeah. I just thought I was being like a total misandrist, like whatever he's asked. I don't care.
It happens to the best of us, misandry.
Such is the world. For Mildred, we have Maggie Smith.
Oh, okay.
Rest in peace, but B. Arthur. That's a wishful thinking, but yes. And then Goldie Hawn.
Ooh, okay.
She would be fun. She would be very fun, I think.
Yeah.
For Sarah, we've got Sarah has the most casting options. We've got Janelle Monáe. Keke Palmer.
Okay.
Yara Shahidi. Lacey Mosley. And Lupita Nyong'o.
Ooh, wow. That is great. It's funny. I used to do this too. I was doing this last year with the agent I was working with. I love these suggestions. Aubrey Plaza was the one I really wanted for Hestia.
She would be good. She would be very good.
Yeah. I wanted Isabella Rossellini, I thought would be a really interesting Mildred.
Oh, she would be fantastic.
Yeah, she's fun. I mean, she's very funny.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you all mentioned B. Arthur because that's sort of how I picture her. Like that's sort of how I hear her. She's very B. Arthur in my mind.
Well, yeah, it definitely comes across. Definitely comes across.
Yeah.
I don't know this person for Marcello, but Dylan Bruno.
Oh, I don't know him. Okay.
And then Pedro Pascal is the other suggestion who we all know and love.
He's on my list too. Yes. He's number one on my list.
How could he not be?
Yeah.
For Jamie, I agree with one of these and I disagree with the other. I will tell you both because I am not about censoring anybody. But Colin Firth and Adam Scott.
Ooh, Colin Firth and Adam Scott. That's two different directions, isn't it?
Very different, yeah. I pictured him as a redhead, but I don't know why. Tom, we have Tom Hollander, or specifically Russell Brand in Wanderlust. It's hilarious. No one wanted to cast Christopher, which I don't blame them.
Yeah.
He was difficult and sad. That was the saddest I felt during the whole book. Yeah. For the mom, we have Helen Mirren. Blythe Danner, which makes me very sad because Blythe Danner, I feel like I want her to be my mom.
Yeah.
I don't want Hestia's mom to be my mom. Julianne Moore. For the dad, these are both good. Woody Allen or Michael Caine.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, when I said Woody Allen, I was thinking Woody Harrelson. Then for Ethan, we have Luke Wilson.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Dustin Milligan and Aaron Eckhart.
Oh, okay.
Aaron Eckhart would be good. And then we have for Ed, Mel Gibson. Mandy Patinkin, which I feel like is sometimes a very favorite casting choice of this group. Yeah. And Sam Elliott, also a very favorite casting choice of this group.
Yeah, they're really versatile.
Yeah.
Did you say someone for Johnny Puppets?
No, we missed Johnny Puppets.
Okay.
Anybody have a last minute effort for Johnny Puppets? What? Andy Samberg.
Oh wow.
That would be good. That would be good.
I had imagined Jack Black. He's like my fantasy cast.
Yeah, he would be great.
Yeah.
I could also see like in a different direction, Michael Cera for him.
Oh yeah. See, I saw Michael Cera as Tom. Yeah.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah.
I see that.
That's so funny. I also saw Zach Galifianakis possibly as Jamie, I think. Just like the hairy.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I could definitely see that.
But I like that. I like both of those.
I realize now we also didn't cast Alexi.
Oh right. Yeah.
But I feel like his face isn't in view a lot. It's between her legs. So I think that we can buy it honestly.
That is very true.
Good for her, man. Good for her. Well, I think that's where we'll leave it. We'll give you back your evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We loved Hestia. We loved hearing all about this world. We can't wait to see your next book. And everybody give it up for Christine.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to hang out with you guys and do this tonight.
Thank you, Christine. Well, and Julia will talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, great. Take care.